It begins quietly, in that familiar space between hope and exhaustion, where you've probably found yourself more times than you can count. Maybe it's late at night, when the world finally slows down and your thoughts grow louder. Or maybe it's in the middle of a busy day when everything looks normal on the outside, yet something inside you feels disconnected, waiting for a sign, a confirmation, a moment of clarity. So you ask the universe for proof. You ask for signals, numbers, coincidences, miracles, and when nothing obvious appears, doubt settles in, soft at first, then heavy. But what if the reason you haven't been receiving clear answers isn't because the universe is silent, but because your energy has been tuned to waiting instead of receiving? Most people don't realize this, but asking for proof often comes from a place of emotional fatigue. It's the voice of someone who has tried before, believed before, and doesn't want to be disappointed again. There is nothing wrong with that. It's human. Yet this subtle posture of "show me first, then I'll trust" keeps your nervous system locked in vigilance, and vigilance is not the same as openness. Real connection doesn't arrive through force or demand. It emerges through alignment. Today, we're going to talk about something deeper than manifestation techniques or spiritual concepts. We're going to explore how your internal state shapes what you're able to perceive, and why changing your frequency is not about becoming someone else, but about returning to yourself. This is about learning how to soften control, quiet inner noise, and step into a relationship with life that feels guided instead of resisted. As you listen, allow yourself to slow down. Let this be a moment of presence. And if something resonates, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your experience in the comments. Your journey matters here. When proof becomes resistance, there is a quiet pattern that lives inside almost everyone who has walked a spiritual path for a while. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It hides behind reasonable thoughts, behind careful planning, behind phrases like, "I just want to be sure," or "I don't want to get my hopes up again." Yet this pattern slowly shapes your reality more than you realize. It begins the moment you start asking the universe to convince you. On the surface, it feels innocent. You want clarity. You want reassurance. You want something tangible to hold on to before you take the next step. But underneath that request is a deeper emotional posture: protection. Your system is trying to avoid another disappointment, another emotional fall, another moment of believing only to feel let down. This is not weakness. This is biology. Your nervous system remembers every time you tried, trusted, hoped, and didn't receive what you expected. Over time, it learns to stay alert. It learns to wait. It learns to scan for guarantees. And that state of waiting becomes your baseline frequency. Here is where most people misunderstand energy. It isn't something mystical floating around you. It is your inner climate. It is the tension in your shoulders. It is the way your breath shortens when you feel uncertain. It is the story your mind repeats when life feels unstable. Energy is embodied, and when your body is living in vigilance, your perception narrows. You begin to look for dramatic signs. You want numbers, symbols, sudden breakthroughs. You want the universe to speak loudly enough to cut through your fear. But subtle guidance does not compete with inner noise. It waits. There is a profound paradox here. The more you demand proof, the more you signal that you do not feel safe. And when you do not feel safe, your system stays in survival mode. In survival mode, you cannot sense nuance. You miss quiet invitations. You overlook gentle openings. You dismiss small alignments because they don't match the grand moment you imagined. This is why so many people say the universe feels silent. It isn't silent. You are tense. Bruce Lipton explains that beliefs are not just thoughts. They become biological instructions. When you carry the belief, "I need proof before I move," your body translates that into contraction. Your muscles tighten. Your breath becomes shallow. Your heart rate subtly increases. You enter a state of guarded observation. From that state, everything feels distant. You might meditate, you might visualize, you might repeat affirmations, but underneath it all, your body is still waiting for confirmation before allowing itself to relax. And the universe does not respond to waiting energy. It responds to coherence. Coherence is when your thoughts, emotions, and physical state begin to agree with each other. It is when your body stops preparing for disappointment and starts allowing possibility. Joe Dispenza often speaks about this moment as leaving the familiar self behind, not in some dramatic transformation, but in small internal shifts. A softer breath, a quieter mind, a subtle sense of presence. Connection begins there. Not when you ask harder, not when you search more aggressively, but when you gently release the need to be convinced. Think of a radio. It does not create music. It tunes into it. If the dial is filled with static, you don't blame the station. You adjust the frequency. In the same way, your inner state determines what you are able to receive. Many people believe they are asking the universe for answers. In reality, they are asking from a closed posture. Their hearts are guarded. Their bodies are braced. Their minds are rehearsing disappointment. And then they wonder why nothing changes. The shift is subtle, but everything depends on it. Instead of asking, "Can you prove this to me?" the energy becomes, "I am available to notice what is already here." That single internal movement changes how your entire system listens. When you stop demanding certainty, something unexpected happens. You become sensitive again. You notice patterns, you feel nudges, you sense timing. Not because magic suddenly appears, but because your nervous system finally allows you to perceive life without armor. This is where connection actually begins. The silent language of alignment. There comes a moment on every inner journey when you realize that connection is not something you chase. It is something you remember. It arrives quietly, often disguised as a sense of stillness, a softening in the chest, or a subtle clarity that feels less like excitement and more like relief. This is the language the universe uses most often. It does not shout. It whispers through your body. Many people believe alignment means feeling positive all the time. But alignment is not emotional perfection. It is honesty inside yourself. It is allowing fatigue to exist without resisting it. It is acknowledging grief without trying to spiritually bypass it. It is admitting confusion without immediately demanding answers. This kind of inner truth creates space, and space is what allows guidance to enter. When you begin to feel disconnected from life, it is rarely because something external has gone wrong. It is usually because your inner world has become crowded. Thoughts pile up. Expectations accumulate. Old disappointments linger in the nervous system. Over time, your awareness becomes layered with unresolved emotion, and everything starts to feel distant, even when nothing dramatic has changed. This is where frequency becomes practical. Your frequency is the sum of how you breathe, how you hold your body, how you speak to yourself when things don't go as planned. It is the emotional climate you carry into every moment. If that climate is heavy with pressure or self-doubt, even beautiful opportunities can feel invisible. What most people call signs from the universe are often moments of resonance. A sentence you overhear, a thought that suddenly feels clear, a chance encounter that shifts your perspective. These are not random. They emerge when your internal state becomes receptive enough to recognize them. Carl Jung described this as meaningful coincidence, not magic, not fantasy, meaning. The outer world reflecting the inner readiness to see, yet this readiness cannot be forced. There is a certain exhaustion that comes from trying too hard to be spiritual, from monitoring every emotion, from analyzing every experience, from searching constantly for confirmation that you're on the right path. This effort quietly drains your vitality. It turns connection into a task instead of a relationship. Alignment feels different. It feels like coming home to yourself. It feels like letting your shoulders drop after holding them tense for too long. It feels like breathing deeper without realizing you were holding your breath. It feels like giving yourself permission to not have everything figured out. In this state, your intuition becomes clearer, not louder. It doesn't arrive with dramatic messages. It arrives as a simple knowing, a gentle inclination, a calm sense of direction that doesn't need justification. You might notice that when you stop obsessing over outcomes, ideas begin to surface naturally. Conversations flow differently. Small opportunities appear. You feel guided not by urgency, but by quiet confidence. This is not coincidence, this is coherence. Your body and mind are no longer sending mixed signals to life. Many spiritual teachings focus on visualization and intention, but they often overlook the foundation beneath them, emotional safety. If your system does not feel safe, no amount of affirmations will open perception. Safety is what allows the heart to stay open. Safety is what lets the mind rest. Safety is what permits you to receive subtle guidance. This is why moments of connection often happen during simple activities: walking, showering, driving, sitting quietly with a cup of tea. In those moments, the mind relaxes its grip, the body softens, and suddenly clarity arrives without effort. You were never meant to wrestle the universe. You were meant to meet it, and that meeting does not happen in your thoughts. It happens in your nervous system. It happens when you allow yourself to be present without demanding guarantees. It happens when you release the need to control how connection should look. Alignment is not a destination. It is a state of inner permission. And once you taste it even briefly, you begin to understand that the universe has been responding all along. When guidance arrives as discomfort, there is a quiet misunderstanding that lives inside many spiritual journeys. People expect connection with the universe to feel warm, gentle, and reassuring at all times. They imagine guidance as something that wraps around them like comfort, and sometimes it does. But just as often, guidance arrives wearing a very different face. It arrives as restlessness. It arrives as a sudden awareness that something in your life no longer fits. It arrives as a subtle tension in your chest when you think about staying where you are. This is where many people become confused. They assume that if something feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong. Yet growth rarely announces itself with ease. Expansion almost always begins with friction. Your nervous system has spent years learning what is familiar. Even when familiar patterns bring pain, they still feel safe because they are known. When the universe begins to open a new direction, your body often reacts first. You feel unsettled. Your routines start to feel empty. Your old coping mechanisms lose their effectiveness. This is not punishment. This is reorientation. Joe Dispenza speaks about this moment as the collapse of the old self. Not in a dramatic sense, but in a subtle biological way. The emotional chemistry you once lived in no longer satisfies you. The thoughts that once made sense begin to feel hollow. There is a quiet internal pressure to become someone new, even if you don't yet know who that is. Many interpret this phase as spiritual failure. In truth, it is spiritual initiation. The discomfort is not random. It is information. It is your system recognizing that it is ready for a different frequency, even while your conscious mind resists change. This inner conflict can feel exhausting. You may notice waves of sadness without a clear reason. You may feel disconnected from people you once resonated with. You may experience a sense of being in between worlds. This is a sacred threshold. At this stage, the universe often communicates through contrasts. What drains you becomes obvious. What nourishes you stands out. You begin to sense which conversations feel heavy and which ones feel alive. Your tolerance for superficiality decreases. Your sensitivity increases. You crave meaning, not stimulation. These are not coincidences. They are signals that your internal environment is shifting. Yet many people try to suppress this phase. They distract themselves. They numb it with busyness. They search for quick spiritual fixes. They want the discomfort to disappear instead of listening to what it carries. But this discomfort is asking something very specific of you. It is inviting you to release outdated identities. It is encouraging you to loosen attachments to who you thought you had to be. It is gently pushing you toward authenticity. Guidance does not always come as answers. Sometimes it comes as a growing inability to tolerate what is misaligned. Bruce Lipton reminds us that the body is always responding to the environment, both external and internal. When your inner beliefs begin to shift, your biology follows. Old emotional patterns lose their grip. New sensations emerge. You might feel tired, sensitive, or unusually reflective. These are signs of reorganization, not regression. There is a deep intelligence at work here. The universe is not rearranging your life against your will. It is responding to the part of you that is ready for more truth. And here is something rarely spoken about. Clarity often comes after confusion. Alignment often follows disorientation. Before you feel guided, you may feel lost. Before you feel connected, you may feel empty. This is the space where transformation gestates. Think of a seed underground. There is darkness before there is light. There is pressure before there is growth. The soil does not apologize for this process. Neither does life. If you find yourself in a season where nothing feels certain, where old dreams feel distant and new ones have not yet formed, understand this. You are not disconnected. You are transitioning. And in that transition, the universe is closer than you think. The moment you stop controlling and start listening, there is a delicate shift that happens when you finally grow tired of forcing outcomes. It doesn't arrive with celebration. It arrives with surrender. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet surrender that comes after you've tried every strategy your mind could create. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. Something inside you softens. The urgency fades, and in that softening, a new kind of awareness begins to surface. Control has a way of disguising itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you are being proactive, prepared, realistic, but often, control is simply fear wearing adult clothing. It is the nervous system attempting to predict every possible outcome so it doesn't have to feel vulnerable again. Over time, this creates an internal rigidity that blocks sensitivity to life's subtle guidance. When you release control, even slightly, your body notices first. Your shoulders drop, your jaw relaxes, your breathing deepens. These small physiological changes open a doorway, not to fantasy but to perception. You begin to sense what feels aligned and what feels heavy. You recognize when something is forcing itself and when something is flowing. This is the beginning of listening. Listening does not mean waiting passively. It means being present enough to feel the difference between intuition and anxiety. Anxiety is loud, repetitive, and urgent. Intuition is calm, simple, and steady. Anxiety demands immediate action. Intuition invites reflection. Most people confuse the two because they have spent years living in mental noise. As the inner volume lowers, patterns become visible. You notice which thoughts drain you and which ones expand you. You become aware of how certain environments affect your energy. You feel when a conversation resonates and when it leaves you depleted. These perceptions were always available. They were just drowned out by the need to control. This is where co-creation truly begins. Not as a spiritual buzzword, but as a lived experience. You bring your awareness. Life brings opportunities. You bring presence. Life brings synchronicity. You bring honesty. Life brings clarity. It becomes a dialogue rather than a battle. Napoleon Hill spoke about faith as a state of mind that can be cultivated. But this faith is not blind belief. It is inner alignment. It is choosing to move forward without demanding guarantees. It is trusting your capacity to respond to whatever arises. This kind of faith changes how you walk through uncertainty. Neville Goddard described it as assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Yet this is often misunderstood. It is not pretending everything is perfect. It is allowing yourself to inhabit the emotional posture of someone who trusts life, someone who is not bracing for collapse, someone who feels supported, even in the unknown. When you embody this state, your actions change naturally. You speak differently, you make choices from clarity instead of fear. You stop chasing validation, you stop postponing peace. The universe responds to this internal shift with precision, not always with instant results, but with sequences. A conversation leads to an idea leads to an opportunity leads to a decision. Each step feels modest on its own, but together they form a path. This is how guidance usually appears, through movement, not miracles. Many people miss these moments because they are waiting for something dramatic. They overlook the quiet invitations, they dismiss small openings, they underestimate the power of incremental alignment. But when you are listening, truly listening, nothing feels random. A book falls into your hands at the right moment. A stranger says exactly what you needed to hear. A delay protects you from something unseen. A closed door redirects you towards something better. These are not signs to worship. They are signals to notice. And noticing requires stillness. There is a profound intelligence moving through your life. It does not operate on panic. It does not rush. It unfolds with timing that your mind cannot always understand. When you stop trying to manage every detail, you allow that intelligence to guide you. Control tightens, listening opens. And in that opening, connection deepens in ways that no amount of forcing ever could. Closing in coherence. What you have been exploring here is not a technique, and it is not another spiritual shortcut. It is a return to something deeply human and quietly powerful, your ability to feel life instead of fighting it. When you stop asking the universe to prove itself, you begin to notice how often it has been speaking through your body, your emotions, and your intuition. Connection was never missing. It was waiting for you to soften. Changing your frequency does not mean becoming someone else. It means releasing the inner tension that kept you braced for disappointment. It means allowing presence to replace urgency, and awareness to replace control. As that shift happens, guidance becomes natural. You start recognizing the subtle movements of life. You sense when to pause and when to move forward. You feel less alone inside your own experience. The universe does not respond to desperation, it responds to coherence. And coherence begins the moment you stop demanding certainty and start trusting your capacity to meet whatever unfolds. If this message resonated, take a quiet moment to feel what has shifted inside you. Even a small change matters. That is how transformation begins. Not with fireworks, but with a gentle inner realignment that carries you forward, one conscious step at a time. Now I want to ask you something important. If you stopped waiting for proof and truly trusted your inner guidance, what would you allow yourself to change first in your life? If this video spoke to you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next messages in this journey of alignment and consciousness. And stay with me on the end screen, because the next video continues this conversation and takes you even deeper into reconnecting with the universe.